Hello, my name is Eliana Benevides. When I was 14, I was diagnosed with anorexia. My initial reaction upon diagnosis was complete disbelief. I mean, I would know that I have an eating disorder, right? Wrong. It turns out that eating disorders cause individuals to not be able to recognize their own symptoms. This lack of recognition of symptoms before diagnosis then may translate into a lack of symptom recognition after treatment. Many people say that they've recovered from eating disorders, but few people stop to ask them if they're fully recovered. Oftentimes, these words are said much too early, after the body has completely recovered, but before the brain has fully regained function. To figure out why eating disorders exist, and why someone could have one and not recognize it, I decided to research the neurobiology behind eating disorders. But before we dive into the brain, though, let's take a step back. Eating disorders. We've all heard of them, but what are they, really? Eating disorders are mental health conditions that are characterized by unusual behaviors towards food or exercise. Think hiding food in napkins, over-exercising, that sort of thing. A few of the main types are anorexia, which is restrictive eating behaviors, bulimia, which is repetitive binging and purging of food, and binge eating disorder, which is consuming of large amounts of food followed by feelings of guilt. According to the Harvard Strategic Training Initiative for the Prevention of Eating Disorders, an estimated 28.8 million Americans, more than 9% of the US population, will experience an eating disorder in their lifetime. And the crazy thing is that this statistic doesn't even cover the millions of people who suffer from disordered eating thoughts and behaviors, but don't meet the criteria for a full-fledged eating disorder. Okay, so now that we've got the gist of eating disorders, let's go into the brain. For these statistics, I'm going to be mostly focusing on anorexia as it comprises the majority of eating disorder research. Eating disorders can cause large-scale and small-scale changes in the brain. Starting off big picture, adults with anorexia can lose up to 4 to 6% of their gray matter, or the stuff that processes information in their brains. Furthermore, children and teens suffering from anorexia can lose up to 7.5 to 8% of their gray matter. That's a lot of neurons. And in addition to these large-scale changes in the brain, eating disorders also cause changes in specific areas of the brain, particularly in the salient system, the reward system, and the sensory system. Starting off with the salient system. The salient system is composed of the anterior cingulate, the orbitofrontal cortex, and the insula, and usually it controls the approach to food. However, in individuals with anorexia, National Institutes of Health studies have found decreased activity in the salience network. This means that the brain causes an individual to want to approach food less often, indicating food restriction or constraint. Okay, so now for the reward system. The reward system, surprisingly, deals with reward evaluation. It's composed of the ventral striatum, which controls reward motivation, the anterior cingulate, which controls how the brain values rewards, and the orbitofrontal cortex, which controls the expectation of a reward. In contrast to the salience network, the researchers have found that there's actually increased activity in the reward system. This means that individuals suffering from eating disorders have an increased responsiveness to rewards, but also means that they are also more sensitive to punishment. When individuals are more sensitive to punishment, they're more likely to think out of fear rather than enjoyment of food. In addition to these behavioral changes in food consumption, eating disorders also cause changes in the way food is physically perceived by the brain. In the sensory system, researchers have found that individuals with eating disorders have an altered ability to taste sweet stimuli. This means that individuals with eating disorders physically taste food differently than the rest of the general population, and this influences the food choices that they make. It's important to recognize that it's important to recognize that these changes are not choices. People with eating disorders are physically unable to recognize how their thoughts influence their behaviors. That's why you can't just tell someone with an eating disorder to just eat more. Their neural pathways are like well-cut rivers in the brain. However, with the choice of recovery, it is possible for individuals to create new pathways in the brain for their thoughts to follow. But how long does recovery really take, especially if these networks are so ingrained with the brain? According to eating disorder researcher Dr. Jeffrey Sarbo, it takes the brain a minimum of 6 months to even begin the process of recovery. And it takes the brain a minimum of 6 months to even begin the process of recovery. After 6 months into my own recovery, my weight was restored and my physical symptoms were gone. I insisted that since my body was fine, I was fine, even though I was still stuck in the habitual neural patterns of an eating disorder. With time and therapy, I was able to fully recover. However, many individuals never get this opportunity. Their bodies may be recovered, but their brains are still suffering from eating disorder thoughts. So, what can we do? How can we aid in recovery? And how can we help people's brains become more in sync with their bodies? Number 1, don't assume presence or absence of an eating disorder or degree of recovery based on someone's physical appearance. According to the National Association of Anorexia Nervosa and Associated Disorders, only 6% of individuals suffering from eating disorders are considered medically underweight. This means that people can look happy and healthy, even if they're still struggling with eating disorder thoughts. This brings me to point number 2. Watch your language. Robin Williams once said, "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." This means that you have to assume that everything you say could have an impact on someone else's body image. For example, I know that most of us have said at some point during our lives, "Oh my gosh, that food was so bad for me." However, what might be an offhand comment for us might cause someone else to slip back in those patterns of thought associated with an eating disorder. Even saying that something was good for you or healthy might cause someone to hyper-focus on the nutrition content of a food. The next time that you're talking about food, instead of focusing on the quality of the food, try focusing on what you enjoyed about the food or the situation or the people that you're with. Another way that we can change our language is in our self-talk. Think about the last time that you took a group picture with someone. How many times did you have to retake the picture because someone said they looked bad? Self-critique has become so ingrained in our culture. We need to stop hating ourselves, especially out loud. The things that we say can influence how other people perceive their own bodies. When you're taking a group picture, instead of saying, "Oh, I look terrible," or "I need to go to the gym more," try focusing on non-physical characteristics, like the background or people's expressions. The third thing that we can do is be invested. Actively ask how other people are doing, and wait for a real answer. People are much more likely to open up about their struggles if you are genuinely interested in their mental health. Eating disorders are tough, but recovery is possible and realistic. We can help individuals recover and help their brains become more in sync with their bodies if we are more mindful of our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Thank you.